We're gonna just jump right in. Hope everyone's had a good start to the new year. We'll start off with roll call. So I'm Tony Luisi, Regional Director for DEC.
I'm Chris Hauber, I'm the Executive Director of the Commission.
And Laughlin, Manager for the Public Package.
And Missouri, representing Supervisor Cumming, Lieutenant County.
Harvey Alexander, private citizen.
Steve Rice, citizen member of the board.
Hi, Peter Barber, County Building Supervisor.
And John Frost, also a citizen member.
Great. And let's go to the board members who are attending virtually. Patrick?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Pat Curran from the Albany County Executive's Office.
And Nancy Stoner for Parks.
Nancy Stoner with State Parks.
Anybody else on the board?
Nope.
Good. Okay, great. So let's see. First order of business is to consider the minutes from the December meeting. Those are included in the board packet. Unless there's any discussion, can we have a motion to approve?
Make the motion to approve.
In favor? Aye. Are there any comments from the public, either in the room or virtually? So then we'll just move right along to reports. So I don't have a formal report, but it's good to see Chris back in action after a couple of weeks off for recovery. And I'll have some questions, I think, for Chris's reports, but I don't have anything really to present on other than just to acknowledge what I think everyone knows is that the DEC is going through some leadership transition with the commissioner taking a well-deserved time off. And then we'll be working on a transition plan over the next couple months. And we'll probably all find out the details at the same time together. So with that, I will move it to Chris.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. Just a couple of things. In the program update that's in your board packet, there's some interesting numbers about visitation. The Discovery Center is now back to 2023, basically where we were pre-pandemic in 2019. So last year we had 12,142 visitors click through, and in 2019 it's 12,087. So that's good to see. And also in the packet, the trail usage, the data counters that Neil and his staff put out, we put those out in September of 22. So those click people that walk through, and they click when they walk through and walk back. So we basically simply divide that by two. So we've got a number of over 146,000 visits in 2023. It would be nice to know what that number was pre-pandemic, but I will guarantee you it was a lot lower. Our numbers always were based on a graduate students project a number of years ago. We were around 100,000 visits, remember that, Steve? Doing trailhead counts. So this is a more accurate number. And we have it for all different trailheads. It's pretty interesting. What else? A couple other things. Lupin Fest this year. I'll do that last. Some of the habitat work that we've been doing, prescribed fire. We did the very first prescribed burn ever in February. I don't know if that's good or not. No snow, dry enough to burn. Tyler and his staff and crew, volunteers, rangers from DEC burned on the 28th, second to last day of February this year, first time, which is pretty cool. We've done quite a bit of habitat work. We cleared nearly 40 acres on Kings Road, locust removal. We'll be doing stumping soon. We will be planting soon. That's a large area, but it certainly doesn't have the traffic that Route 155 does, where we cleared 18 acres recently to the south of here, going towards Route 20, and that's on the western side. So we cleared that property. That's Black Locust. That's owned by Mohawk Hudson. That was a transfer from Albany County. It's a foreclosure. Mohawk Hudson owns that property. We manage it under agreement. And the contractor is removing the locust at no charge to us and selling that locust at a reduced fee to Mohawk Hudson, who's going to use it for board. So it's an interesting way to go.
So Chris, is there, so we have no cost in all of that work at the end of the day?
Yeah, there's no cost to us.
That's great.
Yeah, and the site too over on Kings, no cost because the market for locust is so high. They do it at no cost to us. And it's interesting because they're the only company, so say, I don't know how many bids we got, but we got more than 5, probably 8. And none of, except for this one, they're all, well into the hundreds of thousands.
So, and they're stumping the property.
No, I'm sorry. You asked if there's no cost total. No, we have to pay something.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
No,
Because
right.
there's some big yellow machines, I go by it every day.
Yeah,
Three
no,
or four times.
the stumpings, yeah, we don't get,
And while that locust may be lucrative, those are big machines.
yes, we usually have to pay twofold, tree removal, right?
Yeah.
And stumping. No, we pay for stuff.
Yeah, okay. All right, and then will this contractor seed it when they're done?
No, we do that. So we have seed drill of our own, and we use our own seed mix that we collect here, with volunteers and staff. And we pull it with either the skid steer, the Bobcat, or the tractor.
Will we use that old rusty pickup truck to transport the seed over to the site?
It's not rusty, it's just 1 feet up, but it's good for the trails because we can't damage it anymore. And yet, it's okay. Staff were still asking to take the 2 new trucks on the trail, and I say, no,
I'm sorry.
no, you can't. Any other questions? So, Lupin Fest this year, for the last, I think, 11 years, last year 10 or 11. Either way, we've done Lupin Fest in person for a long time. And by all means, it's very successful, but it's really, really labor intensive for staff. And it's expensive when it comes to cost. We get a lot of people here, but we're going to try something different. Because when we were within the pandemic, we couldn't do it in person. So we did everything virtual, where people would do things, they were encouraged to do things on their own. So we're trying something new, where instead of having a one-day Lupin Fest where we bust people in and have vendors and stuff like that, we're doing a Lupin Fest month. So we're going to have programs and activities throughout the whole month. And this is a mock of what a flyer that are in print production now. So there's a calendar, and you can get stamps, and there's an app that we're using called Goose Chase. So you can tag yourself in photos. But this is going out. There are 15,000 being mailed, 13,000 emailed. The other 2,000 are for us. So these will be mailed in the middle of April to our constituents in the area. We do Lupin Fest mailing usually, but this will have the calendar. It's kind of neat. I'll pass these around. And this is Wendy Craney, our communications director, working with Aaron Kyle, our education program director, and a new graphic designer that we have. So they look nice. I guess the only other thing I would say is, you mentioned anything about budget? No.
That was would be one of my questions.
So budget, executive budget included us at a level $3 million in the EPF for appropriation. Both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, came out with one house budgets the week of the 11th. It was the 12th they came out, kept us at $3 million. My hope is we would see maybe a little bump for the grounds project, but I don't know that this was the year for it. But we'll see what happens at the end of the day. The budget is due on the 31st, which is Sunday. The legislature will not be in session over the weekend due to the Easter weekend. And it's been confirmed that they're coming back to pass a budget extender on Tuesday, which is the 2nd, with the goal of having that budget done by the 4th. So we'll see. That's where we know. Okay. Yep.
So I realized we skipped over board member reports.
Oh, yes.
Does anyone from the board have a report they'd like to share? Let's move right, and Neil with us?
Neil's remote, so he wanted to show a couple of photos. I'll let him speak.
All right, Neil, it's all yours.
Yep. Good morning. Chris, can you stop sharing so I can share the couple of slides I have?
I can.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The technical committee did not meet, nor were there any new projects that we reviewed this past quarter. So I decided not to stuff your packet. It seemed like that thing was big enough. But I did follow up. I think it was John that had asked me to visit some of Eden Renewable's solar facilities in relationship to their proposal for a community solar farm on Curry Road in the town of Colony. So I just wanted to show you some of the pictures and the sites that I had visited. If I can, just gotta make sure I share the right screen here.
Neil, we lost your sound.
You lost my sound? Well, I'm not saying anything. All right, you got me now?
Got it.
All right, which Chris, are you seeing the whole slide?
We're seeing the primary slide and then what's coming up next.
Great, okay. Oh, so that's the wrong screen. Hold on, sorry. So I'm gonna try this again, bear with me. First day with Zoom. Share, I want to share screen 2. Share, now what do you got?
There, that's it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll try and be brief, but so on February 6th, I took a day and went over and visited 3 of Eden Renewables facilities in the town of Skodak. All 3 of these facilities are fully installed. So I visited with their principal. I visited Cedar Hill, White River, and Elm Brook. And I just wanted to give you show you the map to give you a sense of where these are, kind of in Rensselaer County, just south of Albany and Rensselaer. Advance. There we go. So all of them look more or less the same. And one of the things that I was looking for with these facilities is the spacing between the rows of panels. And, you know, is there indeed enough room to plant, you know, native grasses and wildflowers, which is their proposal for Curry Road. And there is. I mean, their general operating principle, their business model is to put in solar farms, community solar farms, so that they can be utilized for native pollinator habitat, native bees and butterflies and things. So I wanted to be sure there was enough room. All 3 of these sites look more or less the same. They're on these tables that turn to track the sun over the course of the day, with they're high enough and plenty of space between them to allow enough sunlight to grow native grasses and wildflowers. So that's Cedar Hill. This is Elm Brook. One of the things that's unique about what Eden does, in addition to the larger spacing, is that they don't fence their sites with chain link. They use this sheep fencing, and typically they graze these sites with sheep once a year in the fall. That's not part of their proposal on Curry Road. But aesthetically, the fence looks completely different than what you may be used to seeing if you've driven by a typical solar field. And one of the things that I talked to Eden about when we were in the field is maintaining the fence off the ground high enough that small mammals can get through, but that deer cannot. So we don't really impede wildlife beyond the nuisance wildlife, the giant rabbits with the white tails. So that's Elm Brook. And this is White River. Again, same exact spacing, slightly different angle. All 3 of these sites are in former ag fields. And in addition to native plants, they put up bat houses and bird houses, and overall try and end up having a net conservation benefit from the solar facilities that they install. But since I think it was Mr. Brust that asked me to visit these sites, I just wanted to follow up with you all on that field trip and have a chance to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, Neil, this is Tony. What is the spacing that you're looking for purposes of habitat in terms of the height of the racks and the distance between the racks?
So when they're at their winter angle, or I guess, you know, their shallowest angle, you still want a roughly 3 feet or a meter of height to the bottom of the panels, and around 10 to 20 meters between the panels to make sure there's enough sunlight to grow grass and lupin and things.
Hey, Neil, real quick question. Peter, on your slide, you said there's 8 renewables, but on the right-hand side, so the owner operated was Pure Sky Energy.
Right, so Eden installs them, and then typically it's some other freshly created LLC that operates them. So in this case, for the facility proposed on Curry Road, they're proposing that a new LLC called Lisha 1 and 2 will actually own and operate the facility. But Eden's the parent company installing all of these facilities.
And how many megawatts is this one?
7.5, I believe, is pretty standard for their community solar projects. And because they're smaller, right, there's a whole new office within DEC, ORES, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, but that's only for 20 megawatt size facilities and larger. So anything smaller than that still goes through the conventional seeker process as you know, congruent as part of their municipal review. So in this case, it's going through the town of Colony, and Eden is currently preparing a draft environmental impact statement.
Just FYI, there's one going in solar field going in Montgomery County, 300 megawatts.
Wow, that's large.
Yeah, that would definitely be an ORES project.
Well, and there's nothing locals can do about it because of its size. And the public presentation was not a presentation. It was a circle of boards that you could look at. That is how arrogant, my word, the process is right now for solar fields in New York State.
Well, and again, and Tony can probably speak more to that, John, but those really large sites are managed through the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, and the whole process is designed to be very quick and very streamlined, even when it comes to threatened and endangered species. Typically, it's less than 7 months from concept to approval for an ORES project. So it may not be the applicant, it could be the state review process for big projects like that, which is different.
That one is under the feds, given its size, I believe.
Wow. Okay.
Both feds and state ORES under the Department of State.
But you, in that area, I think it takes up 3,500 acres, and there are working farms in between the solar fields. So if you have one of those working farms, you're literally surrounded by solar. It's, I was not impressed that we're allowing this to happen. Tough on the farmers, or people who've had those properties for generations. I know this is a disconnect, but the whole arena of solar installation is, I think, concerning.
Any other questions for me? Okay,
Thanks for doing that, Neil.
thank you.
Lisa.
I'll get there in a second.
Okay, our statement of financial activity is through January 31st, 2024, 10 months of our fiscal year. Our fiscal year will end March 31st, fiscal date. So I'll go through this as of January. Dues and fees are $6,000 higher than budget. This is due to our Trustco, quarterly Trustco coming in a little bit higher than budget. Government grants and contracts is at 91% of budget. It's directly related to the expenses below, which are lower than budget. This will come in a lot lower than our budget because we budgeted a rollover. We're at $5.5 million budgeted for the year. We'll come in about 3.2, so we will continue that rollover, mainly due to contractual. The rollover we didn't use the 1.36, $3 million and some contractual and stewardship that, touched upon before, made contractors do the work that we budgeted for free to take the wood. Mitigation fees are a little bit over budget, $18,000. This is our land sale, came a little bit over what we budgeted. Lease revenue is on budget for the year. Other revenue is $21,000 higher than budget. This is due to increased merchandise sales and the gift shop program fees and from that one. So we had a great year there. Revenue came in at 93% of budget through January. On the expense side, personnel is on budget, and it's very close to budget here. We'll be a little under benefits, a little bit under any salary cash wise for the year. This does not include our non-cash expenses, which we have a credit of $600,000 in our OPEB, which I've listed below. I just wanted to do the operating cash so you can see the true number before our non-cash expenses were there. Training and travel, a little bit under budget. We had 7 less seasonal staff this year, and we had 2 conferences that were paid for by hosts. So we will be under budget for the year in that. Contractual is under budget. It's at 91% of budget, but this is the big thing that will come under budget here is our $1.363 million rollover from last year for DEC. And some stewardship contracts, we came out a little bit under our Discovery Center as well. Communications is $20,000 under budget. This is mainly due to special events. We did not do several special events this year due to staff and just timing. Occupancy is $81,000 under budget. This is DC utilities came in under, at the time we budgeted, utilities were extremely high. They came down over the course of the year. It's also a placeholder for repairs for the Discovery Center, came a little bit under. We will be a little bit under in that as well. Supplies and equipment are $25,000 under. And this holds our repairs and equipment for vehicles as well. We have a whole fleet being repaired. This will catch up a little bit before the end of March. Other expenses are under budget. We had less dues and fees this year. We did not opt in for an educational subscription, which was a couple $1,000. We have a miscellaneous budget in there of $6,000 as a placeholder that came in under. Total expenses came in at 93% of budget as well as revenue, giving us an operating income of $65,000 through January. Breaking that out below, we have our capital expenditures, which are $32,000. This is our DC conceptual design. As you'll see, we have a budget of $745,000, so we will not spend $700,000 on that because that's the phase 1 conceptual design we have not completed yet. So our operating cash flow would be $33,000. If you look below, and this is a little complicated, but I list this for you because these are non-cash expenses. We have an OPEB service credit this year. This is our other post-employment benefits, which we will get into detail on the next few slides. It came in as a credit against our personnel expense, so I break this out below. New York State retirement system had a difference of $161,000, and this is $347,000 was our expense on our actuarial report, and we actually got a check for $185,000. Depreciation expense $210,000. Our net gain on investment through January was $488,000, giving us a non-cash surplus of $750,000. If you look below, this would be our audited financials from Odessa. If we ended the month in January, it would be $781,000 with our non-cash credit. So revenue and expenses per parent would be $749,000. This includes a balance sheet account of capital. Any questions on that?
Lisa,
Yeah.
in terms of the government granted contracts, the annual budget is much higher than, is that just a timing thing when you expect that?
These are all the rollovers.
Oh, okay.
So we have the $1.8 million in the unencumbered funds. We have a $200,000 from 21-22, a couple $100 from 22-23, and we will have a rollover. I'm projecting about a $5.3 million budget for next year could be with all of the rollovers, which includes our $3 million appropriation, plus all the extra cash and what we could.
Thank you.
So it's 5.5 on here. We should have somewhere around 5.3. We're gonna have to redo our budget in June. Because we didn't spend, quite a bit of that. Yep. Any other questions? On to the statement of net assets. Our cash and cash equivalents, $192,000 less. This is just the timing of when we pay our bills, really pay our expenditures versus when we receive money. And we did transfer money, $500,000 into an interest-bearing account. So that was great. Grants receivable, so $271,000 more. This has been paid. This was PPC funds. So mitigation was $30,000. This has been paid as well. This was landfill money for the quarter that was sold. Lease receivable. This is our new GASB 87 report that we implemented last year with Wojcicki. You will see this end up about $30,000 for the year, and this is 2 months of our rent from TNC that will be owed. Inventory, which is a slight adjustment due to fiscal inventory. Prepaid expenses, $55,000 less. This is just due to the timing of end of year expenses from last year into this year. You will see this number go up on the audited financials. Will be pretty close to last year. Investment gains, $488,000 through January. Again, in all 4 funds, so it was a great month. We have $534,000 gain in February. I just pulled those reports. Capital assets decreased $178,000. This is due to depreciation expense of $210,000 and $32,000 in conceptual design. Land remained the same. Deferred outflows. You're going to see these next 2 accounts. This is the actuarial report from New York State Retirement System on a 160-page report that we receive every year. You'll see the deferred outflows decreased $30,000. This is due to a cash payment decrease of our increase of $185,000 versus $150,000 of last year, and a $5,000 decrease in changes of assumption. Net pension asset has never been recognized as an asset until last year. This is the portion of the entire billions of dollars of the retirement system that we are allocated through the New York State Retirement System. This is now 0. Going through the audit last year, they were very surprised to see an asset reported and said that we will probably never see one again. So that's why that is 0. Total assets decreased $7,600. Liabilities, accounts payable, and accrued expenses increased. The main increase is due to a bond payable for our tree removal contract, and we will repay that this year. Deferred revenue remains the same. This is our national grid for the power line and translocation. New York State pension liability. Again, this is related to the deferred outflows and the net pension asset above. This is our actuary report. It decreased, and just due to a decrease in deferred inflows, and it's trued up every year. We have an allocation percentage as well that they give us on those billions of dollars. So that's the reason for that, and we can look at the detail on that. That will be coming up. Lease liability. This is our TNC lease liability that we have to record now, according to GASB 87. You will see this decrease to about $30,000 as well, because we have 2 months left on our lease, which is April and May. On the OPEB liability, this decrease of $600,000 is due to the increase in the discount rate over a 20-year period. So we had a discount rate of 2.83 versus a discount rate this year of 4.05. If you figure that difference out over 20 years, you need less of a present value to get to that end number. So it saves us a lot of. The total liability decreased $789,000 due to a decrease mainly in OPEB and New York State. Net assets, capital assets decreased $178,000 due to depreciation and purchase. reserved assets remain the same, unreserved assets increased 960,000, giving us an increase in total net assets of 781,000. This is due to our operating increase of 65,000, non-cash credits of 438,000, a gain of investments of 488,000, and depreciation of 200. Any questions on that? A lot of numbers there. Investment summary, great news for January. We have 488,000 increase in all funds, and as I said, February, 530. Any questions?
Just one question, I just know the answer to this, but under assets, 159,000 for land, what is that?
That's our land purchase of our property that Chris worked so hard on.
Oh, okay, and that's
Yeah.
how we record.
That's how we record
Right.
it.
Okay.
Yep. There's a liability.
This is an
So
asset, and
we
we don't
purchased
appreciate it.
three properties, they are.
That brings us to our action items, and we have a number of them for today. So, Chris, could you walk us through?
I can. So the first one is, we are required to annually review and then accept the purchasing and procurement guidelines as the public authority of the public authority law, which is cited there, the resolution for you. This goes to the audit committee prior to review and offer any recommendations that the committee met last week and did not offer any recommendations to it. It's pretty much verbatim for every public authority. All those rules. And they follow. So, if there's any questions,
This is pretty much just boilerplate then. And there have been no amendments to this since 2018, I believe it says. Did outside counsel review this as part of last year's policies and procedures?
no, they did not. Because it is a template from the authority's budget office. And if they make changes, then we would make changes. Okay.
So unless there's any other discussion, we have a motion to approve the proposed resolution that confirms we've conducted our annual review of these guidelines, and there are no proposed amendments.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Second one is again, that duty is, we are required to annually review the investment policy statement. The IPS, which guides our investments, the four investment funds that you saw that Lisa just had up. So these two go to the audit committee. Do you want me to speak for the audit committee?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the audit committee asked Peter Marici is here with us to give a presentation to the board on our annual investment. Well, last week the audit committee met, and there was an individual there that is part of the investment strategy for all of KeyBank that went through a full discussion with the audit committee, looking at the investments, how they're invested, what percentages are equities, fixed income, or cash, and that was because the committee asked for that review. So this individual is going to come back next month and provide some recommendations to that. And then the committee is going to talk about those recommendations at a meeting at the end of April. But at this point, because these have to be reviewed and adopted annually, the committee said, well, let's adopt them like we have done every March. And if there are changes, then we'll come back into June. Is that an accurate summary? Okay. John? Okay. So at this point, there's no changes. This is the same as it's been since they were revised.
And based on the presentation that we received the other day, we'll probably get back to the full board with some changes recommended.
Yep.
No other questions? We have a motion to approve the annual review of the investment policy.
So moved. I'll second that.
And all in favor?
Thank you. The third one is a multi-year contract. It's for service agreement for our elevator. It is, in summary, we went out and got quotes. This is a different company. They ended up giving a quote of the same price for the company that we used for the last year. So there's no increase in price. And this locks it in at, it's $225 a month for 3 years.
Why did you change?
Because they matched the price, they kept it lower. And they were recommended well from First Columbia. Right, John? Yeah. Not
Yeah,
John, Ross.
yeah.
John Ross.
Yeah, highly recommend.
Any questions?
I will make a motion to approve.
Certainly.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor? Thank you very much.
Contracts is what Andrew Curry loves, is what gives the board packet at 150 plus. Thank goodness for electronic board packets, correct?
Just don't fix the elevator on holidays or Sundays.
It's a little pricey. But that's.
I'll carry someone up the stairs.
That's the market. I know, that's a little steep. Yep. No surprise there. So the fourth resolution, action item D, the three-part resolution. You've heard me report at the last few meetings that, so for the grounds project that we have, we determined that the best thing to do is to work with the New York State Office of General Services Design and Construction. Because that's what they do. State project, it's state funding, it's state property, for the most part. I'll get to that. We have been working towards an agreement. We've had a draft agreement, going back and forth with our attorney. Tony took a look at it for me too, to have another set of eyes on it. So that is now back with OGS with their attorneys. I've learned recently that we're going to have a license agreement, because the first phase of the grounds project, which is our accessible trail, which is going around this building to the south and coming back around, goes on City of Albany property. So it's dedicated to the preserve, but title is still held by the city. So OGS is requiring a three-way license agreement with the city, OGS, and us. So they're drafting that. I tried to perhaps get out of that because it's dedicated, because title is held. So the idea here is enter, first of all, the overall agreement with OGS and set up an account. So OGS, when they do projects, OGS Design and Construction, when they do projects for agencies, that's what they do for state agencies. They set up a specific account for that project. They did the Five Rivers a few years ago. They did the Five Rivers. So the resolution is set up the agreement, set up the account, and because we can't get any more of an advance on our EPF appropriation over 25%, we would have to borrow from either the reserve account or the endowment secondarily, take that money, send it to OGS, put it in that account so they can work on the project. OGS works on that project, sends us the detail back. We send that detail like Lisa does for all of the other stuff that we do now, and then we get reimbursed. So it's like a small revolving. My hope was if the EPF goes up, we could say we just take that funding and put it in that account. The controller's office prohibits that. So this is the way to make this work. And the point is here is that no money would come out of reserves or endowment, preferably reserves, unless it's either budgeted or it's appropriate.
What magnitude of what they're thinking that's gonna be for this thing?
For this phase, we have the funding for. That's what part of it is going to be rolled over. Lisa was talking about the capital. We had like 700,000 in there. we actually have the budget for this year. I think that would probably cover the design and construction documents and the actual construction. So we're covered with that. Phase B and B2 is the expensive one. That's closer to 5 million. That will probably be pared back. So I don't know the answer to that.
So
But we can't move any more money than we would have appropriated.
okay, so this is the future years, not for next operating
No,
year.
no, it lines it up so we can do it, and it ties back to that agreement that we have. So we have everything. And just as a point of reference, I started this conversation with OGS in May. So I'd like to have this agreement done by May of 24. If possible. So,
And the agreement subject to approval by the commission, OGS, the comptroller involved?
yes. Attorney General, I sign on behalf of the commission for Tony. The Attorney General, the Controller, and the Commissioner of OGS all sign it.
When do you envision this actually being implemented?
The grounds project overall.
Actually, the people on the ground actually working on it.
No, I hope this calendar, certainly this fiscal year, if we get the agreement in place, since we have the funding to do the accessible trail. That's my expectation. That's phase A.
And as OGS draws from the account, how soon thereafter do they send us kind of a statement, you know, what is it, a quarterly statement?
Yes,
Expenses?
in the draft agreement they provided, they said they would send us statements quarterly, but in a conversation that we had, I requested them more frequently. I asked that for them monthly, if not bi-monthly. And I think they can do that. Because the quicker we get it back, we submit it, at least it submits it, we get the funding. Yeah.
And under what circumstances would we have to pull from the endowment to keep that fund, put that account funded?
When the next phase comes along, so say the next, I'll use an example, say the next phase, say we needed $2 million, and we got an increase of $2 million in our appropriation if we had that kind of fund. If we had it there, we would transfer that $2 million to this account. We would expend those funds. As those funds get expended, we get the documentation back. We submit the DEC, we get our funding, and then the money goes back to that reserve account. Because we don't want that money out of our account we want it as short as period of time as possible. But it's the only way to make the project work. Other agencies, like, for example, DEC, is part of their overall budget. When they did 5 Rivers, they have a certain amount of their budget. All that money goes right to OGS to that special account, and they just work from it, right? Smaller agencies like ours, sorry, this is the only opportunity to have.
And Chris, does OGS work on a percent of construction costs?
Yes,
You know what that is?
I don't. I have to see that. I'll show that. They did it before, when we did this facility. And I can't remember what it was. Yes, that's their, they don't do it for free for state agencies, they charge you, right? That's how they're supplied. But they make sure you're totally in compliance, that's with state finance law. Is that clear enough? I have no trouble writing this resolution, to make it short and clear. Okay.
One request maybe for the wording of the first resolution.
Yeah.
This is saying in consultation with council in that second line.
Yes.
Should we strike that and then move it to the end where we say, subject to adequate funding and council approval?
Yes. But don't you want that in the first resolution too, because they're gonna look at that, they're gonna look on.
Yeah, I was just saying, strike it from there.
Oh,
At the end of the first resolution.
yep, gotta do that, absolutely. Yep, got it.
Just to make it clear that the agreement that the commission won't enter into it unless council approves.
questions? Nope, okay.
We have a motion to approve.
To do adopt as an amendment.
Second,
Peter, are you
all in favor?
okay? Thank you. Action item E is audit and governance committee members. This is kind of a housekeeping resolution to make sure that these, the members of the audit committee are up to date through a resolution, and the governance committee includes the treasurer, because going back and looking at the original resolution that was passed a few years ago, a number of years ago, the treasurer was not in that resolution. And that resolution is based on the bylaws. Bylaws are accurate, the resolution is not, so that's updated. So John, whether you like it or not, as treasurer, you will be part of the governance. Yeah. I suppose you have done. Are there any questions? Sort of, okay.
Want to make a note that I'll use myself as
Yeah,
well.
and for,
Guy is the one who recommended.
Yep. Just the chair recommends. Okay. Is there a resolution? So moved. Peter?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay. Okay. One final one here is a resolution to accept mitigation of 28 Pine Lane. I will show you a map for some context. So at the last meeting, we had talked about accepting property that's, there's a little more context. This is Crossgates Mall. This is Crossgates Commons. So Walmart, Home Depot over here. This is Raft Road. This is the Carter Blue Hill, as it used to be called, that's managed by DEC that we work with, that ties into protected land going up here, the Blueberry Hill. This area here is mitigation from pyramid companies for the development of this, the apartment complex here. The board approved that resolution. This is in process. I'm working on a conveyance agreement with our attorney and pyramid attorneys. This parcel here is 2.2 acres, it's 30 Pine Lane. The technical committee provided comments to the city of Albany in 2016. It is now, the project is now final, and the applicant slash developer has developed a 24 unit apartment building on the site. And the planning board required that the back portion, which is hashed here, closer you can see better, which is about 0.8 acres, 0.8 of an acre, be protected. So I've been working with the city of Albany, the planning department, to have this set up to come to the commission. Originally it was going to be a conservation easement with a nature conservancy. It's just we decided we would make it a donation to the commission. And you can see it is now surrounded on 3 sides by a protected preserve. It's habitat. It can be, what's it look like now, Neil? Joel, it's grassy.
Grassy and shrubby.
Yeah. So it's certainly restorable to fine barrens fairly quickly. So this just approves the ability for the commission to accept the property based upon our internal policy, our real property acquisition policy, to move forward. I'm working with, like I said, I'm working with our attorney on it. We got a conveyance agreement from the owner's attorney earlier this week, is going to our attorney for review. I have requested that they do a phase 1 environmental, have that, see that before we take it. I don't want us to pay for it. That's not reasonable. Then we'll do our own survey. We'll walk the property. And we need title update. So that's kind of in process. So that's why this is actually. So that will add this piece here, and then we'll have more protection here adjacent, so we have an even better corridor coming up. Any increases there? Chris, what's that one? Pyramid? Yeah. I am in negotiations, our attorney and their attorney are in negotiations with the conveyance agreement because Pyramid does not want to pay for the education materials that are involved. They want the commission to pay for it. And my argument was, I don't believe that was the intent of the planning board. The intent of the planning board and the intent of the commission's technical committee was to recommend educational materials, including the kiosk and the new mural, go into the mall as part of mitigation to offset the impacts of the development. Or
I think the town planner would fully support you for this.
I would think, and I haven't come to the town yet. So it is up to me to probably have a conversation with Pyramid to get that conveyance agreement done. It's in Pyramid's best interest because they can't get a certificate of occupancy for the current owner of that development until we have the conveyance agreement. Perfect. Thank you. Yes.
I thought that was what.
Have you say it? Yes, I appreciate you. I was not going to bring it up. I appreciate you asking. So, any other questions on the property? And I mean, it's in the resolution, but it's recommended for full protection.
How do we usually phrase the resolution with respect to the fact that we do not yet have the title report or the updated survey or the phase one?
The same way, because it has to be in accordance with the acquisition policy, and the acquisition policy.
So those conditions are incorporated by reference.
Yep. Yep. Any questions?
Motion to approve? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you. Okay. All right. Presentations. We have Peter Marici here from KeyBank. Brian was unable to attend, so thank you, Peter, for coming to present for us. Sure. Peter has the printout books.
Yes,
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
And would you like me to bring it up on the screen, or do folks just want to follow through? I sent, all board members do have it. I sent it electronically. But I can also share it now.
Thank you. I'm sorry, you asked the question. I apologize. I was focusing on it.
No, that's all right.
You could bring it up and I'll go through it.
Yeah.
And I have some, looks like I have some extras. I'll leave them here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep, I'll take a few.
You'll take them? Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Absolutely. If they stand up there, is that right?
Yeah, that's okay. I will share this. And I'm not sure, right here. Yep, that's good.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter.
How long do I have? I don't want to, Lord knows I can talk.
Actually, we're about 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So
20, okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Marici. It's nice to see you all. Chris said my colleague, Brian sends his best. He could not make it last minute. So I will go through this report, and I guess if you have any questions after going through it, please feel free to. So if you go to the page, that starts with market and economic review. This is through February 29th, 2024. I believe you said that this is the right. So this is the last month of the year, or the second last month. So we came into 2024. If you remember, last 2 months of 2023 were phenomenal in terms of both the equity and the fixed income market as a result of interest rates falling during those last 2 months, and came into a pretty strong end of 2023. Came into 2024, the market was hoping for 7 rate cuts, and they didn't think there was going to be a lot of decent economic activity. The first 2 months of this year have proven that wrong, right? Economic activity has been pretty good, very good as a matter of fact. And the Federal Reserve has basically said, we're not getting 7 rate cuts, we're gonna get 3 rate cuts, maybe. And that won't happen probably until the start of June. So what has transpired in the first 2 months of the year? Equities have done very well. Fixed income not so, because rates have risen since the end of 2023. So first bullet point, the market continued to build on its momentum. That's what I was just saying. Again, led by mega cap technology. You may have heard the phrase, the Magnificent Seven, right? 7 stocks have basically powered the market last year. A couple of those have been thrown off the island. I think it's now referred to as the Fantastic Four, and who knows, it may be down to the Terrific Three if you give us some time. Bullet point number 2 is that all equities U.S. were up. We favor the U.S. market over the non-U.S. market, but the non-U.S. market has started to do well. The third bullet point is what I mentioned, economic activity is actually very strong, much stronger than a lot of the market anticipated. That's why they thought there would be 7 rate cuts. KeyBank was never in that camp. We were thinking 3 at most, and we're still thinking 3 at most. Wouldn't be surprised if there's only 2. We were always in the camp that if he had to cut 7 times, that means economic activity was going the wrong way. And that actually would have been worse for the stock market. So we're actually pretty pleased about this. The fourth bullet point is just minutes from, this is through February 29th. We've had another meeting. He's reaffirmed 3 rate cuts, and we say hopefully in 2024. The final bullet point here is that we've had a good start. The estimate S&P 500 earnings are rising. And those estimates are rising, right? It's hard for stocks long term to go down. So it bodes well for the stock market. Having said that, it is very common, extremely common, for the S&P 500 to fall during a calendar year 10%. It's just very common. Case in point, at the end of July last year, year to date, the S&P was up 20%. By the end of October, it was only up 10%. There's your 10% drop. And by the end of the year, the S&P was up 26%, which was an amazing 2 months. So that's why you stay fully invested. We tell clients to stay because you never know when it's going to go down, and then it comes back up really quickly. So you've had a good start. Don't be surprised, especially with an election year, summer doldrums. It wouldn't surprise us if we see a dip at some point during this year, but we are positive long term in the equity market.
There seems to be a big rotation going on. Is that going to have a big effect?
Oh, actually, a good effect. We're glad to see that the stock market is broadening out besides the Magnificent Seven, Terrific Four, whatever you want to call it. We're seeing small cap stocks starting to do well. We're seeing industrials. We're seeing energy materials. That's what we thought coming in, but because the market thought there would be less growth, they still powered into the Fantastic Four, and NVIDIA, Microsoft, blah, blah, blah. But some of them have started to dip. So we are seeing the broadening out, albeit slowly, but broadening out. So if you go to the next page, and this is page 5 for those in the book, you can just see the black is the 1-year return. So you can see U.S. large cap has done unbelievably well. Most things are in the positive territory. The far right, you can see commodities and REITs, negative commodities. The good news is when we went to the pump, we filled up our car, we paid less. The bad news is if you invested in some commodities, probably didn't do that well. But we are much more positive on the U.S. market than others. So if you go to the next page, page 6, this is just a graph or a chart of our views. Even though we're higher on, we're positive about the stock market, we're staying neutral relative to everyone's investment objective. Again, we like the U.S. market. Can you pull that up a little higher? There you go. A little more positive on the U.S. market. Slightly longer on duration now if rates start coming down, and we expect that to happen, then being slightly longer duration, but not too much. And trying to stay neutral in like high yield, where we're not trying to take a lot of risk in the fixed income side. So you can skip over to page 7, and we go to page 9, which is the performance summary for each. And this is through February 29th. So the first two, the Pine Bush Endowment and the Discovery Center, have balanced objectives. And you can see for the first quarter to date, which is the first 2 months of the year, and year to date, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, the shorter term numbers slightly ahead of benchmarks, and the longer term slightly below. And the last two, the reserve and the OPEB accounts, they're all fixed income. So with rates rising, it's been a little bit tougher part of the year for fixed income. I'll stop there since this is sort of the results. See if there's any questions. No? Okay. So the next couple pages, it shows the performance of all the investments versus their respective benchmarks. And the only one that, that is starting to do much better, but at the time, is that equal weight, the second one down, Invesco equal weight. That's the S&P 500, but it's not capital weighted. It's 1/500th of every company. If you remember in the last year, banks had some issues, and if you weren't, so that investment didn't do as well, but it's starting to do better now because we're past the banking crisis, and we're not seeing the growth as much now in some of those magnificent sectors. In fact, some of them are down. Apple, for example, is down like 12% year to date. There's a lot of numbers here. We can skip over a couple pages. And if we go to page 13 in your book, and this says the next page, Chris. So this is the endowment, and this is the allocation as of now. Current allocation is 56% equities, 35% fixed income, real assets, which is just a TIP investment, and cash. So if you go to the next page, you can see the values, and it's basically 2 pages. And you'll see in the third column, change in market value, you see all negatives. It's not because it went down. There was a transfer from this account to the OPEB account. So, so if you go to the second page here, you'll see that the change in value, keep going, is down, is minus 89,000, but that reflects 190 something thousand transfer. So in effect, the account's up. That transfer didn't take place over 100,000 for the first 2 months. So if you go to the next page, this just shows your long term. I mean, you've probably seen it from year to year, but obviously 2022 was not the best year for anybody in the market, right? But we're starting to come back. So if you go to the couple other pages now, page 18, you'll see the Discovery Center, and the allocation also balanced pretty close to what we just saw. Again, we have fixed income equities and some tips and that's what we call the real asset. So if you go to the next page, and it's 2 pages, you'll see that this is where we didn't have any transfers out. This market value is up. I guess you have to go 3 pages. Page 21, it's up about $4,000 at the start of the year. Am I going too fast? Is everyone okay? Okay, good. Okay, good. So if you go to the next 2 pages, we'll go to the reserves, the Pine Bush reserves. Page 24. And this is an all fixed income account, maximum income account, excuse me. So we have fixed income, and again, real assets, which is basically fixed assets, the TIPS investment. And if you go to the next page, now you have some individual bond holdings in here besides bond funds, and some of they're high quality. We don't invest in any, and we're constantly monitoring the credit worthiness of the bond funds. But when you have a longer dated maturity, you can see like the third one down has a maturity of 2029, the fourth one down 2030. With rates going up, it affected the market value, but we're not concerned about its credit worthiness. And unless something changes, we expect to get the coupon and the maturity in 2029, 2030, et cetera. But we've constantly monitored. So if something drastically change it. We are not afraid to make a change. And then you followed up with some fixed income funds that have done okay. They're 2 pages worth. So if you go to the second page, and just page 26, you'll see that the market value has declined a little bit. And that's because of the rising interest rates. Like I said, we came into this year after the last 2 months of the year rates had fallen. Put in perspective, in the last 2 months of 2023, the 10-year Treasury went from 5% to around 3.8, 3.9. That's what fueled the last 2 months. Right now, the 10-year is back up to 4.2, and it got as high as 4.4. So that interest rate increase is going to affect negatively on. And then the final, we can go to page, the OPEB account, and same allocation as the previous one, the maximum income. Again, this is the account that received the transfer. So if you go to the next page, you'll see the value's up 198,000, but 190 or so was transferred from that first account. But it's still up, which is good. We like up. So I know after this, there's some information about the investment policy statement, but I'm not. So, I would love to take some, or love, but I will take some questions. And I will try to answer them as best I could. And if there's something I'm not able to answer, I will jot it down and make sure Brian and Susan get back to you as quickly. So.
Did we decide at one point at least to consider the OPEB investment strategy away from or
changed
away from fixed?
Well, what we originally when OPEB was set up, the determination was, let's make it as conservative as possible because it has to be maintained. So we set it all up in cash.
Yeah.
And then when we just looked at the IPS when it was updated in March of 20, that's when we changed the OPEB account to be reflective of the reserve account. So there's fixed and cash in it. So it's basically the same strategy to split. So I think what we'll probably see, the recommendation that will come, that we'll get next month, is to look at probably adding some equities into both the reserve and the OPEB, and probably even more of an equity. It's just speculation, but more of an equity mix for both endowments. Because again, the returns are good, but there's I mean the committee has asked the question. The returns are good, yes, we're happy. Can they be better? If they are, we want to make it, as good fiscal stewards. Questions for Peter?
Nice seeing you all again.
Peter, nice to have you back. Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
See you. Take care. Thank you. All right. It's good to see you. Thank you. Steve, Neil is actually not going to do the report on people tonight. We may do that at an upcoming meeting. So that gives Steve a little more time. Steve, you do not have until 11:30. I'll go longer if you want.
What did you do to get your screen to not show up now?
I presented it now.
No, I get to show. I get it. Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted, before I get started, I want to say that what I'm going to present is very much a collaborative effort. I especially want to acknowledge the contributions of Dylan, who just left us, and Neil, as well as the contributions of our science staff, who our science tech, who collect much of the data you're going to see, as well as the stewardship and fire staff, who do all the habitat management.
So, I wanted to start with just a few quick reminders about current blue ecology that'll be relevant for the rest of the presentation. First is that this species occurs in oak savanna chimeric ecosystem, so it likes relatively open conditions. So that's a few trees in the canopy and a mix of shrubs and grasses in the understory. Second, remember that the larvae of the species only feeds on lupin. So lupin is a critical component of the species habitat. Without lupin, you're not going to have any Kerner blues. And then third thing to remember is that the Kerners have 2 generations or 2 broods per year. So they overwinter in the egg stage. Those eggs hatch, give rise to the first brood of adults. This is a touch screen, isn't it?
Yep.
So that first brood of adults only lives for about 3 to 5 days. During that time, they mate, they lay eggs. That gives rise to the second brood. The adults of that second brood then lay eggs that then overwinter and give rise to the first brood for the following year. The Kerner blue is an endangered species at both the state and federal levels. The threats to the Kerner blue are really the same as affect most threatened endangered species. Habitat loss being the biggest threat. Much of the Kerner habitat has been destroyed and replaced with human development. Here are a couple local examples that you're probably familiar with. Habitat fragmentation usually accompanies habitat loss. Habitat fragmentation is a problem because it makes it more difficult for Kerners to move among habitat patches. And so for Kerner blues, even things like just roads and forest strips are considered fragmenting features in the landscape. Habitat degradation is also a problem. Decades of fire suppression in the pine bush has led to habitat degradation. Without fire to periodically burn these areas have become overgrown with shrubs and trees, which lead to conditions that are unsuitable for the Kerner blue. Invasive plants, invasive species, especially invasive plants, are also a problem. These things come in, they shade out, they outcompete native and other plants that the Kerners need. As can be seen here, this is the case of Asiatic bittersweet overtaking the understory. And then also in the case of black locust, this species comes in, it becomes established, it completely alters the vegetation composition and structure and turns it into a closed canopy forest, which is completely unsuitable for the Kerner blue. And then we expect over the long term, climate change is going to pose a threat to this species across its range. So what are we doing to address these threats? Well, we're dealing with the threats of habitat loss and fragmentation by protecting land. You're all aware of our efforts to acquire more land. Adding land increases the size of the preserve. If you increase the size of the preserve, then we're able to have a larger population of Kerner blues. Larger populations are less likely to go extinct. Also, adding land to the preserve increases the connectivity of the preserve. If you increase the connectivity of the preserve, then you're making it easier for Kerners to move among different parts of the preserve. And if they can move among different parts of the preserve more easily, then if any place in any part of the preserve, the population becomes extirpated, those butterflies are more able to recolonize those areas and restart the populations in that. So across the entire preserve, if butterflies are able to move around, that's going to lower the extinction risk of the population across the preserve. We're dealing with habitat degradation through habitat management. This is just sort of our simplified recipe for making barrens. So we start with communities that have been altered by either fire suppression or invasive species. Then we use mechanical, chemical, and fire management to turn these areas into communities that are capable of supporting Kerner blues, such as successional northern sampling grasslands and pitch pines for both barrens. And then we use these same methods to maintain these sites in these conditions. Now, this is a vast oversimplification of what actually happens. This is meant to sort of summarize, not downplay the amount of work that's involved. Joel, Jesse, and Tyler do a whole lot of work to get us from here to here and keep us here. But that was like a whole other talk. So this is just meant to sort of just quickly summarize all the work that goes into how we deal with habitat degradation. So when we restore these areas, we want to make sure that we have plenty of lupin planted into these restored areas. So this shows you how much planting we've done. You can see before we started planting, there was only about 4 hectares. You can see these teeny tiny pink patches. That's where the lupin was hanging on before we started planting. Since then, we planted over 363 hectares of these restored areas with lupin, native nectar species and native grasses. So we've greatly expanded the distribution of lupin within the preserve. And then most recently, we've planted up here, this is the Schenectady Pine Barrens. We've planted up into that area. Now, once we restore these patches, the butterflies don't show up to them, or at least not right away, especially if those patches are isolated from other patches. So we help the carners along by accelerating the colonization of these patches, and we do that through captive rearing and release. With captive rearing and release, we collect gravid females. We transport those gravid females to rearing facilities. New Hampshire Department of Fish and Game have those rearing facilities. We transport the gravid females to there. They rear the eggs and the larvae, and then they give us back the pupae. And when the pupae, we have those pupae, and when they're ready to eclose, we put them in these butterfly tents with a nectar source, and then soon after they emerge, we go out and release them to the research site. So this map shows you all the release sites. So starting in 2008, we released 8,000 butterflies in 28 different patches. Most recently, we released up here at a site called Zebra in 2021. All right, so that should give you some idea of the efforts we're putting into recovering the butterfly. But to determine the effectiveness of these efforts, we need to know how our recovery efforts are affecting population size. And in particular, we want to know how is our population size doing relative to state and federal recovery criteria. And state and federal recovery criteria are the same for this species. And that is, we're looking for greater than 3,000 first or second brood adults in 4 out of 5 consecutive years. And then we also want to know how our populations are spatially distributed, because part of the recovery criteria is that we want to have our population distributed amongst at least 5 subpopulations. So to answer these questions, we've been monitoring the abundance of butterflies in the preserve since 2007 using a method known as distance sampling. This slide shows you where we've surveyed carners this past year. These blue areas are our survey sites, but in these green areas show you all the restored sites where we've also planted lupin. So we're only surveying a subset of those sites. Each of these survey sites are covered with a series of transects that our field techs walk along and count butterflies. So a single survey is our field techs walk all the transects at all the sites within a single day is considered one survey. And then our field techs do 20 to 30 surveys per year through the spring and the summer to try to get as many surveys as we can during the first and second brood. Okay, so now I just wanted to briefly describe how I go about estimating brood sizes, because it's going to be irrelevant to a point I want to make later on, so bear with me. We estimate brood sizes starting with the raw counts using a 2-step process. So we start with the raw counts. That's the counts that the field techs go out. They come back with a count of butterflies they see. We know when they're out there counting butterflies, they're not seeing all the butterflies that are out there. They're only seeing a proportion of butterflies that are actually at those sites. Equivalently, you can think about this is they go out and there's just a probability that they're detecting the butterflies if they're actually present. And so without getting into the details, we take these raw counts from the surveys and we adjust that for this detection probability that we estimate, and that gives us an abundance estimate for each of those surveys. So the X's here are raw counts, and these green dots then show us our estimates of how many butterflies we actually think are out there each of those surveys. So then we take those abundance estimates from each survey, then we fit an insect emergence curve to those data. And the shape of this insect emergence curve is controlled by several parameters that have important biological meaning. The one we're most interested in here is brood size. And brood size is the number of butterflies that have emerged across this entire brood. Remember, these butterflies only live for 3 to 5 days. So during this time, they're emerging and dying, emerging and dying. So the brood size gives us an estimate of how many butterflies emerged over that entire period. And the way I go about fitting this insect population curve is I provide starting values for these parameter estimates, feed that into the model, run the model through an optimization process, and then that optimization process finds the best fitting curve to these abundance estimates. And then the parameter estimates that are associated with that curve are the estimates of these quantities and give us an estimate of brood size. Okay. So now let's move on to some results. Let's start by looking at the brood sizes for all survey sites combined. The first thing I want you to notice here is notice the bars. This is our survey area. and it's increased over time. So what that means is as we restored pine barrens, and release butterflies into those areas, we incorporated those areas into our survey sites. So we are surveying more area over time. As far as population size goes, you can see that since we started counting butterflies in around 2007, we went from just having a few hundred individuals in the first and second brood to now we regularly have, for example, if you look at the second brood now regularly fluctuates between 10 and 20,000 in most years. And then if you remember, the recovery criteria for the state and federal threshold was 3,000. So we exceeded that threshold for the first time in 2013, and then both broods have been over that since. So in terms of population size, it looks like our recovery efforts are working. Also keep in mind, as I mentioned before, that the areas that we're surveying are only a subset of all the areas that have butterflies. So we're only surveying the sites in blue, but all these green areas have been planted and are known to have butterflies, but we can't possibly survey all of those areas. So the estimates I'm providing you are very conservative because they're just based on our survey areas. So our populations are clearly higher because we've increased the quantity of habitat. But I also think that our populations are also higher because we've increased the quality of habitat. And so what this graph shows is this shows the density estimate. So this shows our population estimate standardized by the amount of area that we surveyed in each year. So these represent density. And obviously things went a little crazy in 2020, so it sort of compacts the trends in the other years. But you can see that on average, the densities have been higher in more recent years than they were earlier on. So I take that to mean that we're getting more butterflies per unit area, which must mean we're providing higher habitat quality now than we were back then. We're able to sort of pack more individuals into the same amount of area. The butterflies are not equally distributed across the preserve. Just to give you some idea of the relative contributions of the different areas. So what we do is we group the habitat patches into subpopulations, and we do that based on the proximity of the habitat patches. So patches are within 200 meters of each other. We say, okay, they're part of the same subpopulation unless there's a geographic barrier, such as 155 cuts through here and divides all these up into separate subpopulations. So here are the relative different contributions of the different subpopulations. This is just for the second brood. There's a lot of pie up here, but what I want you to focus on is here in the early years, you can see in 2007 and 2009, we only had our populations distributed among 2 or 3 subpopulations. Now we have a measurable number of individuals now regularly in 7 or 8 subpopulations. So we've clearly increased the distribution of our population. So I would say based on the increase in population size, the increase in densities, the increase in the number of subpopulations observed, I'd say what we're doing is working. Determining why it's working is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we know we're putting a lot of the important pieces in place. We know we're getting vegetation structure, we're getting lupin, we're getting nectar species, we're getting fire. So we're putting a lot of the important pieces in place, and I think we're seeing that in terms of our population response. But I would say we still are sort of trying to figure out the right amounts of everything and the timing of it all. And then on top of that, there's still this whole idea of weather, which affects our populations, and we're trying to understand the effect of weather on our populations as well. So our challenge moving forward, I think, is to try to make sense of some of these factors. An important piece of the puzzle is understanding how management affects our habitat. So to this end, we've been annually monitoring habitat at 7 sites since 2017, and these are some of the same 7 sites that we're also monitoring current populations at. So here's just a list of some of the habitat features that we are measuring, and this just shows you what some of those trends are looking like. This is just for a single, just one of those sites that we're monitoring, just to give you an idea what the data look like. But what's happening here is we're building up a time series of habitat measurements. Then we have the population densities at those sites, so we can start to relate these habitat conditions to the population densities, and hopefully we can understand some of the mechanisms that are driving the population dynamics at these sites. Then hopefully, if we can better understand those relationships, we can use that information to better manage our population. The environmental variables are also likely to play a role. Temperature and rainfall are probably going to be important. We should be able to get those data from our weather station. Snowpack is probably also an important factor because the snowpack insulates the overwintering eggs. We can maybe get, hopefully get some snowpack information from our community science snowpack monitoring program. Looking forward, something else we are thinking about is the effects of climate change, and the local climate is changing. So these are data from the Albany airport. They go back to about 1930. This is just one metric, so this is just the average daily minimum temperature. And so you can see that average daily minimum temperature is changing across all seasons, but especially winter, you can see the slope is twice as steep in winter as it is for these other seasons. So the climate is changing. We can think of this more broadly across the species range. The climate envelope of the species is shifting northward. The models forecast that by 2080, the species is going to, as its climate envelope shifts north, the species is going to be most or all of it will be extirpated from most or all of its current range. So we need to start thinking about how climate change is going to affect our management. We'll likely look to take advantage of our microclimate variation created by our sand dunes. So things like north-facing slopes and frost pockets. These might be able to help us delay the effects of climate change. We might need to consider assisted migration as a way to help move this species distribution northward. I think the Carter is sort of in a good position for this because we already have protocols in place for captive rearing and release. We're going to likely have to think about review our processes and methods that we use to achieve our conservation objectives. So in particular, climate change may affect our ability to use fire as a management tool. You can imagine if things get hotter and drier, that may limit us in terms of how much and when we can burn. And eventually, we may also have to think about how we go about just managing the reserve. I think currently we're all about putting the reserve back to its historical condition. There's been years of degradation in invasive species. We're trying to reverse that and put it sort of back to where it historically was. I think moving forward, we might have to shift our goal to starting to incorporate the effects of climate change into our management goals. And this is sort of an interesting aside. Is like I think there's likely going to be effects of climate change on our operations, at least how we operate in the science department. You may have noticed earlier on this graph, I put some asterisks here on the first fruits of 2001 and 2023. I put those asterisks on there because those estimates of those fruit sizes are unreliable, and they're unreliable for a reason. I think that's related to our hiring practices in the science department and climate change. So let me explain. So this gets us back to why I was showing you how I go about estimating the population. So remember I said I have to give, in order to fit the curves to these data, I have to provide initial parameter estimates to sort of start the model optimization process off. So in this particular case, this TO is just the data first emergence. So in this case, I use a lower value of 120. And if I use a lower value of 110, in this case as a starting value, I essentially get the same curve fit to those data, which yields the same estimates. Whether or not I start with initial estimates of this or this, I wind up with the same population estimate. There's really only one way to fit an insect emergence curve to those data. Now, however, what happens then if we miss the first part of that brood curve? So that happened in 2021, that happened in 2023. So now if I use a lower starting value of 120 and I fit this insect emergence curve, I'm going to get an estimate that was about 6,500. And so then it's like, okay, well, what happens if I use a slightly different starting value for that parameter estimate? Now I get an estimate of 9,000. So that's a 30% difference. And you can see here the curve fit is a little bit wider. So without data at the start of these curves, it's very difficult to fit a population curve and get good estimates of those. And the way these curves are being fit, they're sort of assuming that these points here are sort of at peak population. If the estimate is, if the peak happens earlier and higher, then we could really be we could really be underestimating the size of this brood. So the point is here, without data here, we can't fit a good population, brood curve, and without a good population brood curve, we can't get a good, brood size estimate. So what does this have to do with our hiring practices? Well, most of our field techs, that we hire to do the counts are college students, and college students have, they're on academic schedule. We have to wait for the semester to finish before we can hire them. Garners don't care about academic calendars. So the butterflies emerged early in 2021 and 2023. By the time our techs graduated and finished their semesters and came out to start counting butterflies, they had already missed. The broods were already at peak or past peak emergence. So I expect these the butterflies to emerge earlier. I expect that to be more common, happen more frequently as we go. So this problem of not being able to estimate the first brood is probably going to become a more common problem if we continue to hire sort of college students that are on this academic calendar. So if estimating the first brood size is important now, so we're probably going to have to think about hiring students, or not hiring students, or hiring techs that can be out here early enough to capture that first brood as they come early. So I don't know, I thought that was sort of an interesting sort of aside of how who we hire and how we hire can affect our ability to estimate these brood sizes. Okay, so just to wrap this up, I want to remind you that overall, our management efforts appear to be working. We see that in the increase in population size from where we were to where we are now. For the last 10 years, we've been over the recovery threshold. We've increased the densities of the carners. We've increased the spatial distribution of the carners. Now we have them in a lot more subpopulations. So a lot of what we're doing appears to be working. But as I just mentioned, we still do have some work to in front of us in terms of understanding the mechanistic relationship between the management and the population response. However, I'd like to think that we've bought ourselves some time to sort of figure this stuff out, because I think the prospect of losing the Carter blue population at the Albany Pipers Reserve is considerably less dire now than it was even just 10 years ago. And so also hopefully the fact that we've increased our population, we've increased the distribution, hopefully that will sort of fortify the populations against what could be an uncertain climate future for these guys as we move forward. All right, so that's what I had.
In a natural ecosystem like this, I would not be surprised if you had some sort of an equilibrium in subpopulations between extinction and migration going back and forth. Now, with the planting and the adding individuals to these different areas and such, do you foresee at some point in time not doing that, trying to let it go back into some sort of a natural situation?
I was ready to do that, but then we had zebra. I was like, we were done in 2015. I was like, the butterflies seem to be getting places on their own. And just when we restore areas to sort of let them get there on their own, so it happens. But the opportunity, I guess, was too good to pass up. In 2021, we did introduce more butterflies into zebra. But you know, I would like to see them going, because we have found butterflies in areas that they got there on their own and hundreds of meters away from where they were. And so I do think that they are sort of in this thing. We have enough connectivity now where they are starting to be able to move around on their own. So it would be nice to see if we don't have to do these releases anymore. And if they get
Just releasing more continuous, if there's a one-shot deal
Right.
into those sites, then they
Yeah,
self-sustain
yeah.
and sort of colonize the thing nearby.
Right, but what I'm thinking too is that, you know, you might be in a situation where you're hoping some of the subpopulations will, you know, if you're gonna get an equilibrium in there, you're gonna have to see some going out too. So, you know, you might be in a position where you're not freaking out, you see some of these final populations.
But the DEC and Fish and Wildlife Service give us money to jumpstart a population. I'm simply gonna say.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, what you're talking about is the meta-population dynamics, where we expect certainly, if you manage something, it's certainly not going to be suitable right away, then it's going to sort of increase in suitability, and it'll probably be good for carners for a few years, and then as it gets beyond a certain stage, it's going to become unsuitable again. And so during that time, there's going to be no butterflies, the butterflies will move in, and then the butterflies will decline. And so naturally, we expect sort of this thing to be spatially moving around, where the habitat quality is going up and down, and the butterflies are moving in and going down. But the idea here is, well, this is why being all these connections among observers is so important, because then the butterflies will be able to sort of do that dance on their own, and we don't have to worry about, well, the population is low here, it's low here, we're going to do it. So they should be able to take
And
care of
Harvey, to your
themselves.
point, we are seeing that at some sites where we're burning, and killing all the butterflies in that site.
leaving refugia nearby than recolonize after all the burns. So that, Steve's got that data. We can see that at several sites where fire's killing them and then movement comes back, butterflies move back in, population grows, burn it again, population declines.
It's a very like spatially dynamic system.
Wonderful
It's
data.
cool, but it's also completely bonkers to try to like keep track of it all because the turnover in the vegetation happens so quickly. I did my PhD in forests where it's like you go out in 10 years, the forest looks about the same, but 10 years later, it's a little bit different. This is like months. It's like changes very quickly in months, the vegetation. So you have to really keep on top of things here because everything changes so quickly.
Why was the seismic density in two so high?
2020, that's a good question. We think that we provided good habitat quality, and we think the weather conditions must have just lined up that it went absolute bananas. And like that was during the pandemic, so we didn't have that was Neil, Dylan, and Tyler, and me. We were out counting our flights ourselves. I think if the field tech came back with that number, we would be like, no way, this is unbelievable. We were out there counting butterflies, and we're like, I honestly that year I just trust those observations might even be higher. It was very difficult. Because when there's a distance sampling, you have to walk along a transect and you have to put butterflies in different distance intervals. But when you're walking out and there's just clouds of blue going all over you like this, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to count. And it was unbelievable what happened. There was like.
Because that's what we see in the lab. When you remove them from all the natural
crazy
pressures, the reproductive potential is huge. That typically doesn't happen.
No, and I would think that probably happened then, which you would expect. Some years are going to have really good years for gardeners, and then there are selected species. And you have a cold year, you have a bad weather year, they're going to crash right back down. But the idea is that they lay lots of eggs, and so if we provide good habitat, hopefully we're always maintaining like a minimum population that then they can bounce back if weather conditions get good. But I don't know. Our best guess is that we're providing good habitat, and then if the weather conditions allow them to go, then they might actually take off. But I expected that was probably going to be short-lived and turn up with compression that time. But I think it shows the potential of this area that we get good weather that looks can happen with the population. But it was bonkers that we're trying to count on.
What factor of climate change will cause the extinction of the carnivore?
So there was a current climate report just came out. So there's going to be a number of things. They think that the heat and the drought in Indiana, they think that pushes the population out there. It just taxes the population too much. Lack of rainfall is going to eventually it's going to make the conditions so that they're unsuitable. Either the winter is also a problem because we're not getting the snowpack to protect the eggs, and so if you're losing the eggs are dying over the winter, you're starting with a small population in the first brood, and then if it gets bad weather, then it lowers it further, and then the second brood, and so it's sort of this cumulative thing that if the weather is consistently bad, often enough, then populations sort of get driven down. They just can't sustain in that climate, and we think the climate that they do need is moving northward.
But we have not seen that to date.
Our population actually is doing pretty well, and in the West, I feel like the populations seem to be struggling more. I think.
Indiana.
What's that?
The Indiana subpopulation.
Indiana subpopulation is gone. That one went extinct, and they attributed that to 2 or 3 years of like really harsh, extra hot conditions and drought, and so they lost their population there. But I think in the Northeast, when you look at the climate models, we're supposed to be doing a little bit better here because I think it's supposed to still stay a little bit wetter.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Than they are in the West, and so I think we're a little bit supposed to maybe do a little better, but I don't exactly know what's coming to this, other than we do expect. I think it's going to get hotter. It's going to get. I think we're supposed to get more rain, but I think the rain is supposed to be more less predictable. So we could have periods of drought and then deluges, and then so we might have more rain on average, but I don't know if that's going to be like steady rain. We have periods of drought in between, but sort of all those things compound to cause problems for the carnivores. They don't buffer well against environmental extremes. It's too hot, it's too cold, they die.
Did you notice, when you get the early emergence of the butterflies, is the phenology of the lupin kind of matched with that, or they get to be asynchronous?
What do you think of that?
Here they've been largely synchronous, but that's the other consequence in Indiana, why they think they lost their population. a couple of consecutive droughts and then a really early spring, eggs hatched because eggs are responding to air temperature. Lupin is responding to ground temperature. So if the ground was relatively cold all winter, it was a big mismatch. And basically their whole population hatched before Lupin was up. In 2012, they lost the whole meta population, which was, they think, around 3,000 to 5,000 butterflies.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth us trying to track when the lupin works, when we first start seeing butterflies, to see if we're seeing a mismatch or not, but we don't. Other than saying, oh, lupin's starting to come up, aren't really keeping track of that to know if we are seeing a mismatch in the phenology.
Are they going to try to repopulate the Indiana population?
No, I think they just said, they just gave up on it completely. I think they took it off as a potential restoration site or, as a metapopulation. I think it's gone. I think
It's the southernmost, so
yeah.
the trends are only, gonna be warmer and warmer and less snow. So the National Park Service decided it wasn't worth the effort to put the money in for snow.
Have they seen any populations farther north?
No place for them to go. I think
Yes, go think now.
farther north, but I was
Farther north, do we see any of them migrating north at this point?
No, they have.
There's no habitat up there north for
Right,
them,
no
yeah.
habitat, and they typically don't fly more than a few hundred meters, and they're short 3 to 5 day lifespan.
There's talk of, I mean, in our recovery team meetings, there's talk about in Ontario trying to get population started up there. That would then become the northernmost thing. And they used to historically occur there, so I think they are. I'm not sure where they're at with this, trying to get a population established in Ontario. But if they did that, then that would be a
And that's
population.
the longer term value of our really big subpopulation. The longer we can keep them here, that's a source population for the future up north. And similarly, managing the habitat here means that this habitat is available for similar species that are south of us, needing this type of habitat in the future. So ultimately, that's where conservation is going to go, with trying to expedite moving species around into suitable habitat, because of the current human-dominated landscape, their ability to move by themselves is almost not.
Have you started talking to other preserves about that sort of thing?
The Fish and Wildlife Service has.
Okay.
That's international politics. So.
I mean, on a very small scale, right? We're talking about maybe putting them in a specific pine forest reserve, which is like just north of here, not enough to do anything. But there's also talk of Moreau State Park, which is a little bit farther north, and so maybe we can start to think about moving. But again, these are on the map I showed you. None of those places are going to be by 2080. All these places here in New York are going to be too far south. So, but again, if we could help the population move forward, then or move northward, then maybe we'll give it a chance. But that's not without its thing. We can't just start willy-nilly with the butterflies. We can talk about that, but it's a controversial subject in conservation biology. Talk about picking species up and just moving the distribution to the north, because you're trying to just you're introducing new species into new communities, and it's a very controversial thing. But we're sort of getting back up against the wall where we need to start thinking about doing that kind of stuff, because otherwise those species can't get there on their own. That's sort of where we're at.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other business? Our next meeting is scheduled for June 20th. It will be hybrid by Zoom and in person like this at 9:30. And then once there's anything more, we have a motion to adjourn. Who make that? Second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who participated online with us. Nancy and Pat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.